table HC underscore person. Person underscore ID, which is of type int. Person underscore name, which is of type varchar of 30. So there is a table HC underscore person which has two columns: person ID, person name. Person ID is of type int, person name is of type varchar. A table is being created. Now what I will do is, I will try to perform a database interaction from a Java application to this table using Hibernate. Okay. And now, if you want to make an interaction, from Hibernate framework to database, what are the things that I need to have? The mandatory things are there will be some jar files. Already we have developed some Hibernate applications so that we have collected those jar files. Somewhere we have done that. Let me see. Jars, Hibernate. Here are jars. Actually, the existing path is this. Jars Hibernate. In this path, jars used to exist. Just where is this jars one? We have some jar files which are required for Hibernate. Which are required. These are the third-party jar files. Which are mandatory to interact with Hibernate framework. Basically, this and jar file is required for building. This is not required. This is not mandatory for us. This commons collections.jar has some collection related utility classes. This is not that much mandatory for us. DOM4j is used for XML parsing. That means DOM4j is a framework. Why DOM4j is used means it is used to convert the XML document into Java objects and Java objects into XML. So DOM4j is used for parsing the mapping documents in Hibernate. And ehcache is used to maintain caching in Hibernate. And this is the core jar file. Hibernate 3.jar is the core jar file. This is the mandatory jar file if you want to interact with Hibernate. All the Hibernate related classes and interfaces will be there in Hibernate 3.jar. Now this is some option. This JTA.jar is used for transaction management. And this SL4j is some advanced version of log4j. This SL4J is something like it's a advanced version of log4j. So some log4j configuration can be done to populate, like what are the queries that are generated and all. That we will see. Okay. Other than these things, I think we need to have a jar file which interacts with the database, that is a driver jar file. I think driver jar file is not there here. MySQL.jar is for MySQL database. So let me have a driver jar file. This is a driver jar file for Oracle. This is Oracle fourth type of driver. Those who know JDBC, they can understand what is a driver and what is fourth type of driver. This is a jar file which has Oracle fourth type of driver, Oracle type 4 driver. Okay, these are the jar files. Okay, each and every jar file will have its own importance. Okay, but the root or the primary jar file is Hibernate3.jar, which has all the information. Okay, or it has all the entities which are required to interact with Hibernate framework. Okay, now let me create a new project in Eclipse. Let me close all the stuff. Okay, let me create a new project. Sorry, new Java project. The name Hibernate-apps. So a new project is created with src and bin represents the classes. And if you want to upload the jar files into this project, just right click this, properties, Java build path. Okay, right click the project, go for properties. Okay, go for Java build path, where the third option is libraries. Okay, go for add external jars. This is because the jar files exist in some external location. So add external jars. E jars Hibernate. I'll import all the jar files required. This MySQL.jar file is not required just because now we are interacting with Oracle database. Since we are interacting with Oracle database, we don't require any MySQL.jar now. So now this project is sufficient to develop a Hibernate application just because it has all the jar files imported. Just go for right click, properties. Okay, go for Java build path. In the Java build path we have the third type libraries. In the libraries, go for add external jars and pick up the jars from where we have the jar files. That's it. So the jar files will exist here and the jar files will be available for this project. Okay, that's the first thing. Once we have the jar files, okay, what I'll do is I'll develop the configuration files. Okay. Once the jar files are uploaded, okay, the process will be like this. Okay. The first step of development of a Hibernate application is, okay, the first thing is we need to develop a configuration file which has the information about the database properties and the Hibernate properties. Okay, we need to develop a configuration file which contains the information about the database properties and Hibernate properties. That's the first step. Okay, so first we'll develop that. We'll develop a configuration file which is used to configure the database properties and Hibernate properties. Okay, now the configuration file name should be, okay, the configuration name file in general it will be we'll develop XML file. The name of the file in general it will be hibernate.cfg.xml. Okay, this is the configuration that we can give, hibernate.cfg.xml. Okay, I'll take the sample existing XML file just because no one will develop the XML files manually. So just we'll copy and paste the sample from the Hibernate existing Hibernate applications. Okay, this is a root XML. Sorry. Okay, this is XML header. That's fine, and we have, okay, a DDD imported. Just it is a public DDD which is exported in this URL. Okay, so we have imported that DDD from the specific URL hibernate.sourceforge.net/hibernate configuration something.dd, which contains the definitions about all the tags in Hibernate configuration. Okay, and once the DDD is imported, okay, we'll develop XML file which contains specific tags. Okay, and the root tag for Hibernate configuration is hibernate-configuration. This is the root tag. Okay, each and everything that I tell now is important for interviews. You need to keep in mind. Okay, they may ask what is the root tag for Hibernate configuration file. You should tell that it's hibernate-configuration. Okay, the root tag in the configuration file is hibernate-configuration. Okay, I'll give some time to note it down. Just please observe the things. Okay, the root tag is hibernate-configuration, and in the hibernate-configuration tag we'll have another tag named session-factory. Okay, in the session factory tag, okay, we'll configure all the properties of both Hibernate as well as database. Okay, we'll configure all the properties of Hibernate as well as database. But here, since we are using Oracle driver, we should go with Oracle driver, and the username is, we have used this system HCU. JDBC colon Oracle colon thin colon @ localhost colon the port number for Oracle is 1521/XC. Since we have developed Oracle XC, since we have installed Oracle XC, the database name is XC. Okay, this is the URL syntax to interact with the database from a Java application using Oracle fourth type of driver. Oracle fourth type of driver is also called as thin driver. The URL syntax will be JDBC colon Oracle colon thin colon @ the server in which the database is installed, the machine in which the database is installed. If it is a local machine, we can give localhost. Otherwise, we should give the IP address of the machine. In general, in most of the cases, in most of the companies, a Oracle server or a database server is installed in common machine, and it will be shared by all the developers. So in that case, we cannot give the localhost. We should give the IP address of the system in which Oracle is installed. Okay. Then it is the port number with which Oracle is installed. Any server installed in any machine will be uniquely represented by its port number, not by its name or not by its version. Okay, any server, let's consider like we have Tomcat server, WebSphere, JBoss, we can install hundreds of servers in the same machine. But how we can uniquely represent a server in a machine means using its port number. So, in general, the port number of Oracle will be 1521. Okay.
So, what is thin
See this. Do you have the knowledge of JDBC?
Some sort of.
What this thin driver will do means it will act as a barrier between the Java application and database. Okay. How the let's consider like we give some queries in a Java application. How the queries are triggered to the database. This is the driver, which is a bridge between the Java application and the database. Okay. It is a driver, and if you use this driver will expect a URL in a particular syntax. So the syntax of the URL is JDBC colon Oracle colon thin colon. It's a common thing. Then @ the IP address of the system. If it is in local, then we can give even in local also. Then colon the port number / the database name. Sorry, yeah, the database name. Okay. Now we have configured that driver class using a property hibernate.connection.driver_class. We should use this property itself. We should not change the property name. The property name is hibernate.connection.driver_class, and in the body of the property tag we have given oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle driver. So the driver class that we are using is Oracle driver. Okay, and in the same way we'll give another property with the name hibernate.connection.url. Okay, with the property value as this. This is the URL with which we need to connect to the database from a Java application. And then hibernate.connection.username. What is the username? Again, hibernate.connection.password. Let's see. Hibernate.connection.pool_size. Okay, if you go for JDBC application, if you want to maintain the connection pooling, okay, we ourselves need to write some query. Sorry, we ourselves need to write some code, or we need to depend upon some external libraries which will maintain the connection pooling, like C3P0 and all. Okay, but in case of Hibernate, there is a default connection pooling mechanism. Hibernate itself will maintain the connection pool. Okay, so we'll give the pool size as 10. Okay, we need not to do anything to maintain the connection pooling. Hibernate itself has a default way of maintaining the connection pool. Okay, so we'll give the connection pool size, and dialect tells, okay, which database we are using. Dialect is the main thing that specifies which database is being used for the Hibernate framework. Okay, if the database is if the database that we are using is Oracle, then we will give Oracle dialect. The database that we are using is what you call MySQL, then we give MySQL dialect. Let me see. This is a Hibernate 3.jar. I'll extract this. See, if you see dialects, almost for all the databases, we have a dialect class. This many databases are there in the industry. Okay, DB2, Derby, okay, Firebird, H2B, HSQL, MySQL, Oracle, for all the databases, there is a specific dialect class. Okay, so we are looking for Oracle. Okay, we are using Oracle 10G version, so I will use Oracle 10G dialect. Okay, this is the dialect that I am going to use. Dialect tells to Hibernate which database we are using. Okay, some of the interviews will be asking like that. Okay, like I'll use a Hibernate application. You told that Hibernate application, using a Hibernate application, we can switch easily from one database to another database. But how I can switch from one database to another database means what I need to do to convert or to switch from one database to another database means just we need to change these properties. That's it. If we change these properties, then it is enough to switch from one database to another database. Now, for 2 to 3 years I have used Oracle, and after 3 years I am moving to DB2. Then what are the things that I need to change means I need to only change these properties, these 5 XML configurations, that's it. By changing these properties, we can directly switch the application from Oracle to DB2. Okay, but if you want to do the same thing using JDBC, we need to change all the queries. Okay, see here the queries also will be different from one database to another database. But in Hibernate, we are not going to write any queries. What we will do is we will write some Java objects. We will develop some Java objects, and we will assign the Java objects to Hibernate so that Hibernate will generate the queries for us. So since Hibernate is generating the queries, Hibernate, how it will generate the queries? Just because Hibernate, the database queries the syntax of database queries will be different from different databases, different for different databases. So how Hibernate will generate the queries means as per the dialect. Okay, as per the dialect, Hibernate will generate the queries as per the specific dialect. If it is Oracle 10G dialect, then Hibernate will generate the queries just specific to Oracle 10G. If it is MySQL dialect, then Hibernate will generate the queries that are specific to MySQL. So here on our development part, we are not developing any queries. We are developing only Java objects. Then it's a Hibernate's job to develop the queries. So if it is a Hibernate job to develop the queries, they have already written the logic to develop the queries. Then what we need to do is we need to configure the configuration. We need to do some configuration in the configuration files, Hibernate configuration file, so that this is the database I am using. This is the username, this is the password and all. That's it. Okay? Only that change is enough to migrate from one database to another database in Hibernate. Okay? That's the primary advantage. Okay? Using a simple configuration change, we can migrate or we can switch from one database to another database. Just these 5 properties change can be enough. Understood? Okay, the driver class, URL, username, password, the pool size and dialect. Understood all these properties? Why these properties will be useful? Everybody? Okay? The username, the password, the driver, the URL, connection pool size, all these things we have discussed in JDBC. The only thing that we are not aware in JDBC is dialect that we have discussed now. Okay? It represents the specific database. Which database is being used for these current interactions. Okay? Now, the show SQL flag, by default it will be false. If it is true means it will show the SQL queries generated by Hibernate in the console. By default value will be false. Let me give it as false. Okay. If it is true means let's consider like we'll give an object to Hibernate and Hibernate will generate a query in the backend. But if you want to display that query generated by Hibernate in the console, then we'll make this flag as true. The default value is false. Okay, this flag Hibernate.show_SQL is used as a flag. Okay, which is used to either display the SQL generated or hide the SQL generated. By default, it will not display. Hibernate will not display the SQL generated in the console. But if you want to display the SQLs generated by Hibernate in the console, then we make this flag as true. You can understand if we execute the application. Okay? And format SQL, this is not that much important. HBM to DDL.auto. Why this flag is required means because the possible values for this property are either create, update, read. These are the possible values for this flag. Create or update or read. Okay? What create will do means if you maintain this flag as create. Okay? Whenever we perform a database interaction, okay, let's consider like this is the URL we are using. In this URL, let's consider like there are 100 tables. Let's consider like in this URL there are 100 tables and some 10 views. Okay? Then what Hibernate will do means Hibernate will drop all the database objects in that URL. Okay, let's consider like there are 100 tables. Each and every table may have 50 or 100 rows. Everything will be dropped. If it is the flag is create means, everything will be dropped and the database will be newly created. See, let's consider like there are 100 tables in this URL. We may be interacting with only one table. Let's consider like we are interacting with only person table. That's irrespective. Hibernate will drop all the tables that are present in this URL. If the flag is create, then Hibernate will drop all the tables present in that URL. Okay? And then it will recreate all the tables. Understood? So that's about create. For very beginning, I'll make it create. For the very first application. Then onwards I'll make it update, but for the very first application we'll make it create. But in general, just to demonstrate the create, I am making the flag as create. In general, in 99% scenarios, no one will keep this as created. Why? Because for every database interaction, if all the tables are dropped and recreated means it's not a correct use case with the database interactions. So no one will make the flag as create. In general, how the approach will be means the database tables, views, everything will be created manually. Okay, using some SQL tools. So using some SQL tools, so using some database tools like Toad and all, what we do is we create the database structure. and we'll definitely make this flag as update only. Now what happens? It will not drop the table. If the flag is update, just it will perform only that database interaction. It will not drop the tables. If it is create, then first what it will do means, first it will drop all the tables in that URL and recreate all the tables, and then it will perform the database interaction. If it is update, then it will perform only that database interaction. So the tables will not be dropped, nothing will be done, just only that specific database interaction will be performed. Understood? So in general, how the approach will be means manually through using some other SQL tools, like we have some SQL interaction tools, okay, like SQL Developer, Toad, Squirrel SQL. These are the GUI, graphical user interface tools to interact with the database. In general, most of the scenarios people will use these two, SQL Developer or Toad.
Algorithms are the same in work, or these algorithms are the same in work, same work.
Same work. Yeah, they are used for the same purpose, but the way of interaction, okay, the options that we have will be different. If we take Toad, using Toad we can perform some complex things also. But Toad is a paid tool, it's not an open source. SQL Developer is open source, we can directly download it. Okay, but SQL Developer is very simple for normal database structures. Let's consider like there is a database with 10 tables or database with 100 tables, which we are using only for select operations. Then we use SQL Developer. If you are a DBA, that means database administrator, where you are performing complex database interactions like procedures, functions and all, then you will use Toad. Based on the requirement, you will use the specific database GUI tool. Here, rather than interacting those things from the command prompt, what we will do means we'll download this SQL Developer or Toad or whatever it might be, and we'll interact them from the GUI tool. So, did we download the SQL Developer earlier? Okay. Even just I'll give you the link. Okay, just download it, get it downloaded. It will ask for some registration details. SQL Developer, it will be a software. It is a software which is developed by Oracle itself. It will be a software which we can download for free. So just what we need to do is go to the Oracle site and just we need to register into Oracle first. It will ask for registration. Once we have registered, we can download it from Oracle site, and then once it is downloaded, it will be like a next and next. That's it. Okay. Then I will show how to interact with the database using SQL Developer once it gets downloaded. But let's for today let's use SQL Plus only. Okay. This is okay. Like we can execute the queries and we can see the result, but it will be in a character format. But if you go for SQL Developer or any tool, it will be in a GUI format. I'll show you tomorrow. SQL is it there? Where it is? No, it's not there. Okay, that's fine. It's not mandatory now. Understood what this flag will do? Okay, and the next thing is cache provider. These things are not required right now. And let's configure these mapping resources later on. These are the database properties that we can configure. These are the database as well as some mandatory Hibernate properties that we can configure. Okay, and let me. Once we configure the database properties, okay, what we do is the next step. The first step is configuration of database and Hibernate properties. These are the mostly used database and configuration properties. Okay, for a sample Hibernate application. There are several things. There are hundreds of properties in Hibernate configuration. But in order to interact with Hibernate, okay, for a sample application, these things are enough. Okay, understood? There are several other properties. It's not like only these properties are there. There are several other properties, but we'll use them later on. Okay, those properties are not required for a very sample application. Okay, and these are something like a mandatory properties: dialect, username, password, the driver, URL, connection pool size. Okay, or this is also not required. Okay, HBM to digital auto, show SQL. These are the very frequently used and something like mandatory properties. Okay, and then after developing a configuration, okay, the next step is develop a new package com.hcu.hibernate.demo. Just I'll right click new package. I'll write the package structure. Okay, then it will be created. Okay, if I right click new package structure, then it will give. Tells that the package already exists, just because just now we have created the package. Okay, just we give the package structure and finish, then it will automatically create all the folder structures. Okay, and then I'll develop a new class. Person. Now let me not create a database, let me drop the database here. Now we don't have any database. HU person, HU underscore person, this data, sorry, I have dropped the table, so the table HU person doesn't exist. Okay, now let me consider that there is a table. Let me assume that, okay, we'll use a table HU underscore person which has two things: person underscore ID, person underscore name. Okay, there is a table HU. Let's consider like we'll be using a table with the name HU underscore person, with the name person underscore with two columns: person underscore ID, which is of type int, person underscore name, which is of type var. This is the table that we are going to interact. Okay, then for each and every table that we are going to interact with Hibernate, there should be a corresponding class. Just because we give objects to Hibernate and Hibernate will pass that objects and Hibernate will generate the queries as per the values present in the object. So for each table there should be a class. There should be a corresponding class. Okay, that class will represent that table in Hibernate. We will not use the table directly in Hibernate. Okay, we will use the class that corresponds to the table. We will use the object of the class that corresponds to the table. Okay, that class will say that as a POJO class. We will call that class as a POJO class. POJO means plain old Java object. Plain old Java object. What do you want?
This POJO class.
What's POJO class? Why POJO class is required means, see, in order to interact with Hibernate, okay, we cannot use the table names or SQL queries directly in Hibernate application. So what we do, for each and every table, we'll create a specific class, okay, and if we want to perform some database interactions with that table from Hibernate application, we'll use that class. So that class is said to be a POJO class. So since we have created a person table, for that person table I am creating a POJO class with the name person. Okay. So we need to develop a POJO class. POJO means plain old Java object. Plain old Java object. Plain old Java object, POJO. See, this is POJO class is a class, okay, which is a perfectly encapsulated entity. Okay, a perfectly encapsulated entity will have all private attributes and it will have the corresponding setters and getters that we know already. Okay, that we have discussed already. What is a perfectly encapsulated class? Okay, to create setters and getters, just highlight them, right click, go for source, okay, highlight them, right click, go for source, just there will be option generate getters and setters. Okay, let me tell once again, right click that, highlight them, right click, go for source, okay, in source we have an option generate getters and setters. So go for that. We can select individual also, but since I want both, I am selecting all. So it has generated the setters and getters for ID and name. Okay, set ID, get ID, set name, get name. So from other classes, if you want to interact with ID and name means, just we will use the setters and getters method. Understood? Those who have attended to the previous classes, they will know what is a setter, what is a getter, what is encapsulation, what is private and all. But there is no time for me to explain all these things. You need to refer the previous classes. Okay, this class, okay, this person class, okay, now it is said to be a POJO class, just because it has all encapsulated elements, all the elements encapsulated. Okay, ID name both are private and both ID name have corresponding setters and getters. This is said to be a POJO class. Okay, and what is the difference? Okay, in some cases we can call this even as a Java bin class. Okay, then what is the difference between a POJO class and a Java bin class? A Java bin also has all encapsulated members with setters and getters. But what is the difference means, a Java bin in general will be serializable, but in a POJO class in general it will not be serializable. Okay, Java bin will be serializable, but in general we won't make a POJO class serializable. That's the difference between a normal Java bin and a POJO class. Normal Java bin class and a POJO class. In general, normal Java bin class will be made serializable, but in most of the cases we will not make a POJO class as serializable. It's not required. Understood? Now we have developed a class. That's what I told. See, all the things we had developed in previous classes where we took 3 months. So if you want to discuss all the things, it's not the correct way. Okay? Hmm. See, we have developed a normal class which has ID and name, which actually represents this table. Okay? ID, name. ID is of type int, name is of type varchar. In Java, varchar is a string. Okay? And the next thing is we have created a class, and let's consider we have a table. Then we need to write something, okay, which maps the table with a class, and this column with a specific attribute. Okay, how Hibernate will know? Like this class will represent that specific table. Means Hibernate will not know it by default. We should provide some mapping that this is the table, okay, or this is the POJO class that we need to use if we want to interact with this table, and this is the attribute we need to use for this specific column. Okay, this is the attribute we should use for name column. That mapping should be done by ourselves. Hibernate will not know by default this is a POJO class for _person. We should write some mapping so that, okay, this is the mapping so that person class represents _person table, okay, ID represents person_ID, name represents person_name. That mapping we should write it ourselves. Okay, so now what we will do is we will write a mapping file. In general, mapping files will be written in separate folder. Just I'll write like this. I'll write a HBM folder. In this I'll write a new XML file. Okay. What is the extension for Hibernate configuration file? .cfg.xml. Hibernate is the name, .cfg.xml is the extensions. In the same way, for mapping files, even a mapping file is also a XML file where the name is, in general, we can give any name for the mapping file, but in general the standard is to give the name of, in general the standard is to give the name of the POJO class itself. So, if the POJO class name is person, then we should give person.hbm.xml. Since the POJO class name is person, I have given the name of the mapping file as person.hbm.xml. HBM means Hibernate mapping. HBM means Hibernate mapping. So, this is a configuration file which is used to map Java entities or Java classes, okay, to database objects like tables or views and all. Okay, this mapping file will be used to map the Java entities or Java classes to database objects. Database object can be anything, either a table or view or anything. If you want to map a Java class or if you want to map a POJO class, okay, to a database object like table or view, then we'll map those information in for the HBM files. In general, the HBM file name can be anything. The Hibernate framework will not restrict that the HBM file name should be person. But as per standards, we'll give the POJO class name as the HBM file name. Understood? Now we have developed a HBM file. Let me write the configuration here. Now the root tag is, we need to import the doc type Let me have it from the existing, some of the existing applications. If internet connection is there, means this HBM information will be, the DTD information will be automatically downloaded. See, this is the coming from an external site, external website. Okay. So what happens is, okay, since already these are imported, we can get them through control space. Just what we'll do is, just go for H control space. It will give the tags. Hibernate mapping is the root tag for mapping file. Okay, the root tag for mapping file is Hibernate-mapping. What is the root tag for configuration file? Hibernate-configuration. In the Hibernate-configuration, we'll give a session factory tag. In the session factory, we'll have all the properties, database and Hibernate properties configured. This is a configuration file. And in the mapping file, the root tag is Hibernate mapping. Okay. In the Hibernate mapping, okay, we have several tags. We have the class tag, see if it is if this is connected to internet once, then what happens is, just it will give on control space, it will give all the tags. But since it is not connected to internet, okay, at least just because this DTD information will be there from the external websites. Okay, so if you connect to internet once, what happens means this DTD will be downloaded automatically by Eclipse, and it will keep that in the temporary files. So if you want to get the elements using control space, just connect it to internet once. Okay, then there will be a class tag. Then we can specify the package structure. Here we can specify the package structure. Com HCU Hibernate demo. Please don't write it. I'll take time to note it down. Okay. Or else Sharath will upload these documents in Facebook so that you can download and you can read 100 times. Okay. Just please observe the things what we are doing. We have a Hibernate mapping tag where we specify the package. Where we can specify the package. Okay. Package equal to some com.hcu.hibernate.demo. Okay. Then we'll give the class name. What is the class name? What is the POJO class name? Person. And table. What is the table name? What's the table name that we want? It's a HCU underscore person. There will be an ID tag. Okay. ID tag is used to configure the primary key of the table. ID tag is used to configure the primary key of the table. Okay. If you want to maximize or if you want to convert from lowercase to uppercase, go for Control Shift X. Control Shift X will convert from lowercase to uppercase, and from uppercase to lowercase it will be Control Shift Y. Control Shift X and Control Shift Y. Yes, it's better to give the column names in uppercase. It's a standard. Okay. Nadi, what we do is, then see, we have configured the class name, or we have mapped the class name with the table. Now, if the class name is mapped with the table, the next step is map individual columns to the properties. And
That view on keys over the dots.
okay, class name will be mapped to a specific table name. Once the class name is mapped to a specific table name, and in the class we have multiple properties. Okay, then we need to tell Hibernate that ID is a property which is used to map to person underscore ID. Name is the property which is used to map to person underscore name. That mapping should be given. Okay, and that's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, this ID tag is mandatory. This ID tag is mandatory for a class definition. Okay, then if the ID tag is mandatory, okay, can we tell that primary key is mandatory for a table to interact with Hibernate? See, this ID tag is mandatory in a class definition, and this ID tag is used to map the primary key. Understood? ID tag configuration is mandatory in a class definition, and I am telling that ID tag is mandatory in a class definition of Hibernate mapping. Now, in turn, can we tell that there should be a primary key mandatorily if you want to interact with that table in Hibernate? Yes, definitely. Primary key is mandatory for Hibernate interactions for a specific table, for a specific database table. If there is no primary key, then we cannot interact with that table using Hibernate. It's not possible. That's kind of restriction for Hibernate. Okay? So there should be a primary key. There should be a primary key in Hibernate. If you want, there should be a primary key for a specific table. If you want to map that table in Hibernate, if you want to map the table in Hibernate mapping document, there should be a primary key. Without mapping in the mapping document, we cannot use the table in Hibernate. So in turn, we can tell that if you want to configure a table or if you want to use a table in Hibernate, definitely the table should have a primary key. That's the first thing. Okay, that's the important thing. And then in the ID tag we'll give a generator. What this generator will do means there are two options. Either we can generate a primary key or we can assign the task of generation of primary key to Hibernate. Okay? Either we can generate a primary key or we can assign the task of generation of primary key to Hibernate itself. Hibernate itself can generate a primary key. Or if you don't want Hibernate to generate a primary key for some security reasons, okay, for some security reasons, if you don't want Hibernate to generate a primary key, and if you want to generate the primary key ourselves, let's consider like account table is there, okay, and account table for account table, let's consider account number is a primary key, okay, and if you want Hibernate to generate the account number, it's not correct. Just because account number will have a specific format which is specific to the bank. Let's consider if ICICI bank is there, first 3 digits will represent something, next 4 digits will represent something. Let's consider like what is the country, what is the region, and what is the branch. All that information will be there in the account number. Okay, so that will be specific to the bank. So in that case, will Hibernate generate the primary key or will we develop that for our application. If it is specific to the application, then the primary key will be generated by the application itself. If it is not something specific to the application, any primary key is okay, then we'll give Hibernate, will assign the task to the Hibernate. So there are two possibilities. Either we can give the task of generation of primary key to Hibernate, or we can generate it ourselves. If we are supposed to generate the primary key ourselves, then the generator class should be assigned. Okay? If you want to assign that task to Hibernate, there are some other values, I'll explain that later on. But if you want to generate the primary key ourselves through the application, okay? If it is assigned means Hibernate will expect, okay? If the value is assigned, then Hibernate will expect the primary key to be generated by the application itself. If the value is other than assigned, then the primary key will be generated by the Hibernate framework itself. Okay? If it is assigned, then the primary key should be generated by the application. If it is other than assigned, then Hibernate will take care of primary key generation. Understood? So let me keep it assigned for some time, for the first application. Now, we have one column person_id and we have configured that to the id attribute, and this is a primary key column, this is the primary key property. Okay, and then the primary key property should be configured in the id tag. Okay, and then the remaining properties. What are the remaining properties? This is a primary key property, the remaining property is name. Let me configure this name using the property tag. The primary key property or the primary key column should be configured using the id tag. The remaining columns should be configured using the property tag. And the id tag should be the first tag of the class tag. Okay? The id should be the first child of the class. This class is a XML element, XML mapping element. Okay? In this class, id should be the first element. After id we can define any number of properties, but id should be the first one. Okay, the primary key mapping should be the first one. After we have mapped the primary key property, okay, we can map any number of columns in any order, but the primary key mapping, the id tag, should be the very first element of the class. Understood? Then we'll give the property the same syntax, name equal to, and by default Hibernate will consider the data type as string. By default Hibernate will consider the data type as string. In the mapping document, by default Hibernate will consider a property as a string. Okay, if it is other than string, then what we should give means we should give it as a, we should specify the type. We should specify the type. Name equal to, what is the name of the property? Name. Just copy the values, otherwise there might be some naming inconsistencies. So always it would be better to copy and paste the values. Okay, and what is the column name? Person underscore. Did we give any type? Did we give any type here? No. If we did not give any type, what is the default type that the Hibernate will consider? String. So, is it a string? Is name a string? Yes. So, it doesn't matter. We need not give any type here. Okay? But for clarity purposes, some people will give it as type equal to string, but it is not required. If type is not there means the Hibernate will consider it as a string only. This is not required, but to get the clarity, yeah, this column is of this type. Okay, they will give the type, even if it is a string. But this is not mandatory if it is a string. By default, Hibernate will consider it as a string only. Understood? By default, Hibernate will consider a property as a string only. But if the data type of the property is other than string, then we should specify that. Okay? And one more thing is, Hibernate cannot interact with primitives. Hibernate can deal only with objects. Hibernate can deal only with objects. Hibernate cannot deal with primitive values, or Hibernate cannot deal with primitive data types. Hibernate framework cannot deal with primitive data types. Now, are we using a primitive data type here? Yes or no? Yes. And we are using the JDK 1.5 version. So, this primitive data, the values in primitive data types will be automatically boxed into corresponding wrapper class objects. So, those who have attended the previous classes, they will know what is a wrapper class and what is a primitive type and all, what is the difference and all. Okay? And what Hibernate will do means, what JDK 1.5 will do means, it will automatically box this int into a wrapper class object and it will be interacted with Hibernate. Here, if we are we configuring the primitive or are we configuring the wrapper class? What is the data type here? Primitive. It seems to be primitive, but actually here int is not the primitive int that we have configured here. This is different and this is different. I told clearly that Hibernate can deal only with objects. Hibernate cannot deal with primitives. But what is this? Is this a primitive int data type? Is this a primitive int data type? No. In Hibernate configuration, if we give int means it is not the primitive int. Okay? For some data types in Hibernate, so for some continuously used or some frequently used data types in Hibernate, let's consider like we'll use java.lang.string. Okay, rather than representing java.lang.string every time, which is frequently used, there is a shorthand representation of java.lang.string in Hibernate mapping file, that is string. String is a shorthand representation of java.lang.string in mapping document. So rather than, we can either represent type equal to java.lang.string or its shorthand form string. This shorthand form is valid only for Hibernate mapping document. Okay, in the same way, for java.lang.integer wrapper class, we have a shorthand form int. Okay, this int that we have defined here is not the primitive int data type. Primitives are not valid in Hibernate mapping. It is a shorthand representation of java.lang.integer. Understood? It is a shorthand representation of java.lang.integer. This is not the primitive int data types. Primitives are not at all valid in Hibernate mapping. This is the shorthand representation of the class java.lang.integer. Likewise, for many frequently used data types or many frequently used classes, there are some shorthand representations. So, rather than using a long class name in the attribute value, what we give is, we give the shorthand representation. Rather than giving java.lang.integer, which is a very lengthy one, we'll give simply integer. Int here represents java.lang.integer. It is not the primitive int. It's not the primitive int, it is a shorthand representation of java.lang.integer. Understood? And if the data type is string, we need not to give the type. It's not mandatory. By default, Hibernate will consider it as a string only. Now, both the things are configured. Okay, the mapping document is ready. Okay, now this mapping document, this mapping document is will be configured in the Hibernate configuration file. Mapping resource equal to, in which folder it is? The HBM folder slash. There are 10 HBM files. All the 10 HBM files should be configured here. Okay, if there are 10 HBM files, then 10 mapping tags should be there. Okay, all the mapping files or all the Hibernate mapping files, that means HBM files, should be configured in the CFG file, hibernate.cfg.xml. Okay, using the mapping tag. Understood? Now, the next thing that we need to do is develop an application that interacts with Hibernate. Now, let me develop a class with a main method, Hibernate manager. Okay, I have developed a class with the name Hibernate manager, which has a main method. Okay, now this is the client application. This is the actual Java application which interacts with, which performs some database interaction. Okay, using Hibernate. So, in order to perform some database interaction using Hibernate, the first mandatory thing is configuration file, where we configure the database information. The second thing is we should have a POJO class. Okay, which will be used, okay, as a representation of the database object in the Hibernate. And then third thing is mapping between the POJO class and the database table, which is there in the HBM file. And then last thing is the client, where actually the database interaction will happen. Okay, so first what we'll do is we'll create a configuration object. The first thing that we need to do is create a configuration object and configure the Hibernate configuration file. This, what it will do, this will create a configuration object which is there in org.hibernate.cfg package. The configuration class is there in org.hibernate.cfg package. Okay, this is called class name configuration. Why this class is used means to get the configuration information from hibernate.cfg.xml. This class is used to get the configuration information from hibernate.cfg.xml. First what we do is we create a configuration object and we will execute the configure method. This configure method, what it will do means, by default it will pick up a file with the name hibernate.cfg.xml only. The configure method will pick up a file or will get the configuration information from a file with the name hibernate.cfg.xml only. Okay, so that the configuration file name should be hibernate.cfg.xml. Just because the configure method of the configuration object can fetch the configuration information from a file with the name hibernate.cfg.xml only. So for that reason, we should name the configuration file as, we should name the Hibernate configuration file name as hibernate.cfg.xml. Just because the configure method can fetch the configuration information only from a file with the name hibernate.cfg.xml. Okay, so we use the name as hibernate.cfg.xml. What the configuration object will do means it will fetch the database configuration information from the hibernate.cfg.xml file. Okay, then once the configuration is ready, from the configuration object we'll create an object named session factory. Okay, is there in org.hibernate package, org.hibernate.session factory. There is a method named build a session factory. There is a method named build a session factory in the configuration object, which creates the session factory, which builds the session factory. Okay, let's consider that there is a Gmail application. Let's consider like Gmail is using Hibernate. Now, at the time, let's consider 100 persons are trying to log into their Gmail account. 100 users are trying to log into their Gmail account. Okay, so each and every person 1 information or user 1 information should not collide with user 2 information. User 2 information should not collide with user 3 information. So, to avoid the data collisions, we use a session for each and every user. Okay, to avoid the data collisions, what we do is we use a session for each and every user. In Hibernate also we can have a session for each and every specific user specific database interactions. Okay, so this session factory will act as a factory of the session objects. Understood? Session factory will act as a factory of the session objects. Why session is used means to perform user specific database interactions, we use the session. So this session factory will act as a factory of the session objects. In session factory we will create the session object and we will export the session object. So session factory will act as a factory of the session object, and this session factory, like a connection in JDBC, this session factory is a very expensive object. So to create a session factory we need more resources to be opened. So session factory is a very expensive object. So for a execution, for an application, session factory will be created only once. Okay, the same session factory will be used to create any number of sessions, hundreds or even thousands of sessions. Understood? So we'll create only single session factory. From a single session factory we'll create multiple thousands or lakhs of sessions if we want. Understood? That's how it will be. Now once the session factory is ready, okay, what session factory will do means it will take the information from the configuration, and based on the information from the configuration it will create sessions. That sessions will be specific to the database that is there in the configuration. Okay, it will create a session object that is specific, or that can, it will create a session object that can interact with a specific database. Okay, so it will take the configuration information from the configuration object and it will create a session object, okay, based on the database configuration of information that is present in the configuration. Understood? It will act as a factory of session objects. Now, once we have a session factory, we will create a session object. By executing a method named open session. Even this session is also, we should take from org.hibernate package. Session is there in org.hibernate.classic also, we should not take it. We should consider that from org.hibernate package. org.hibernate.session and org.hibernate.package. session factor. Once the session is ready, we should begin the transaction. So that from this point the transaction will begin. And from this statement the transaction will be ready.
Sir, can we assign different time sessions for different objects?
Different?
Session for different objects. Different time sessions.
Different type session?
Time.
Session?
Yeah.
I have not heard time session in Hibernate. Are you aware of that, or I haven't, in my career I have not yet heard the concept of time session in Java, at least. What do you mean by time session?
I need to say session. Means different sessions for different objects.
See, different session for different objects is not advisable. Just because if we create we can interact, or we can insert or update or retrieve 10 objects, 10 different types of objects during the same transaction or during the same session. If you go on using different session for different objects, means it is not advisable. Different sessions will be for different users, not objects. We can use that, but in a real-time scenario, if 1000 users are using the same application, if 10,000 users are using the same application, if there are 15 or 20 objects at the same time, 15 sessions will be there which will degrade the performance. Understood? So, we should optimize the performance. Understood? So, we should follow the best standards. We can do any, see, there is no specific way to do all the things. Okay, there are several ways to do a thing, but we should choose the best way, the best performing way. Okay? Once we have begun the transaction, okay, then the Hibernate session is ready to perform a database interaction. By telling that begin transaction, we are telling to Hibernate that this session object is ready for performing database interactions. Okay? Now, before that, what we will do is we will create a person object. I want to save this person information into database, into the person table, HU_ person table. Now I have a person object which acts as a representation, which represents HU_ person table. So, in the session there is a method save, which is used to insert the information into the database. Save method is used to insert that record into the database. So, whatever the information present in the person, that information will be inserted into the database just because we have used save. This will commit the transaction. Flush the transaction. And once the purpose of the session is over, then we will close the session. This is what normal Hibernate application. What commit will do means it will commit the transaction. What flush will do means it will ensure that all the data is flushed out into the database. Okay? What save will do means it will trigger the insert query. It will tell the Hibernate that you should generate an insert query with these values for person table. For person table, Hibernate will create an insert query with the specific values that we have given, 100 and Ravindra. Understood? And how Hibernate will generate the insert query based on this object means Hibernate will check like where exactly person is mapped. Person is mapped in the person.hbn.xml. Okay? Yeah. To which column ID is mapped? To which column name is mapped? Okay? And to which table person is mapped? So it will generate the insert query as per the mapping document. What we'll do is just we'll give the person object and we'll say it as save. Then Hibernate at the backend it will create insert query as per the dialect by considering the dialect, so that it will come to know that it is a query specific to Oracle. So it will create a query in a Oracle syntax with the column values as per the mapping document. Understood?
So what if the table is already created?
If the table is
Already created,
okay,
then we need it will create again the table.
see if it depends upon this property. If this is update, the table will not be created again. If this create means the table will be created by Hibernate. Okay. Now, then flush will ensure that all the data will be flushed. There are some chances because of network issues or because of any reason, there are some chances that the data is not completely flushed. Flush method ensures that the data will be completely flushed. Okay, close will close the session. Commit will commit the transaction. Understood? First, create an object. Okay. Create a configuration object which will load the configuration information from hibernate.crg.xml. Okay, and using that configuration, create a session factory object. Okay, the session factory object will act as a factory of sessions. It will fetch the information from the configuration object, and based on the information present in the configuration object, it will create a session. Okay, and once the session factory is ready, from the session factory we'll create a session object. Okay, and once the session is ready, we'll begin the transaction, so that we are telling to Hibernate that from this point this session is ready to perform database interactions or database transactions. Okay, and we'll execute save method, which is something like insert. Save method means we are inserting the information present in this person POJO object into the database, and Hibernate will create a insert query based on the mapping configuration and based on the dialect. Okay, so if the dialect is Oracle, then it will create a Oracle specific insert query, and as per the mapping it will configure the specific columns, and then commit and flush and then close. Okay, at the end let me give it as
Can we put conditions in configuration file like if table exists then don't create only update, if
No.
not exists then
no, we cannot do that. Either we can create or update, but in general 99.99 scenarios, 9% scenarios, we won't create database objects through Hibernate. Okay, we'll create them manually outside the application. From a Hibernate application, we perform only DML and DQL. DDL will not be performed through Hibernate in 99.99% of scenarios. Okay, but to answer your question, there is no way such. There is no such way to configure that. Yeah, if it exists, leave it. If it not exists, then create. That option is not there. Okay.
After exit planning, we do the exit planning, then we can
Which one?
logging settings and the other day, you know, they can update as when
No, he's asking that, is there a way that if it is create, if the table structure exists, then create. Otherwise, update that information, update that table definition. Okay, alter the table definition if the table already exists. If the table doesn't exist, then he wants to create the table. If the table already exists, then the table definition should be altered. but that kind of option is not there. But we can check in Hibernate that whether the record exists or not. The record exists, we can update the record. The record doesn't exist, we can insert the record. There is that kind of option that will tell as we go forward. But for table definition, that kind of option is not there.
So in update option, if the table doesn't exist, update, it gives the update and the table doesn't exist, so it will
Then it will give you exception. Give exception that the table doesn't exist. Sorry. Even in that case, the table will be created. Even in that case, the table will be, even for update option also, the table will be created if it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, the table will be created. But if already exists, the table will not be dropped. But if it is create option, whether it exists or not, the table, if it exists, the table will be dropped and newly created. If it is create, in all the interactions, the table will be dropped and created. But if it is update, if it already exists, yeah, what you are telling is correct. If already exists, then it will be it will be left as it is. If it doesn't exist, then it will be created. Then, sorry, I was confused. To answer your question, the option is to make this update. If you make this update means if the table doesn't exist, okay, then it will be created. If the table already exists, then it will be left like this. Okay? Yeah, just I was confused a bit there. Now I am executing the application. Now it is done. So now let us see the table. Earlier, object history_person doesn't exist. Now history_person exists. Okay. Let me fetch the values. So ID is there and name is there. Okay. Now what I will do is I will insert another person. I insert another person. Okay. Is my option create or update? Is my option create or update? Create. So what I will do is I'll execute this application again. Okay. Now is the table dropped or not? The table is dropped. Again the table is created and again the information is flushed. Okay, that's what the create will do. But if it is update, let me make the value of auto as update. The value is update. Now let me go back and what is the earlier value? We have 100. Now we have 200 and 300. So now let me give 100. And this value. Okay, so let me execute the application. It is done. So now existing database will be left as it is and the records will be inserted. Understand? This is how Hibernate will perform the database interactions. So after 1 month or 2 months, if I want to migrate the database from Oracle to SQL Server, just I need to change only these configurations. I need not to change anything in the queries, I need not to change anything in the application, just I need to change this configuration, that's it. Understood the advantage of Hibernate? And yeah, everything can be configured. We need not to create objects from queries or resulted while fetching. We need not to create from resulted to Java objects. While inserting or updating, we need not to convert from Java objects to queries. Even that will be done by Hibernate. If you want to see what are the queries generated, We'll make this flag as true. By default it will be false. We'll make this flag as true. So, and let me delete the tables. Let me drop the table so that we can see. So the table is dropped and table doesn't exist now. So now is the flag create or update? Update. If the flag is update and the table doesn't exist, the table structure will be created. Oh. It might be the thing with the latest Hibernate version. Okay, with the earlier version 2.0, it was like that in such a way that the table doesn't exist, it will be created. But yeah, great modification. In the earlier version, it was like if the table doesn't exist, then it used to be created. But it's a 3.3 version, which is the latest. I think that feature has been removed in this version. Yes, now it is created and the insert query is being executed. Okay, insert into a person these columns and these values. Okay, and then table is there, the values are there. Understood? But yeah, whatever I told, that is specific to 2.x, that means 2.1 or 2.2 or 2.3. But in the latest version 3.0, it's not like that. We should go for create if you want to create. In update, if it doesn't exist, it will give an exception. Yes, yeah. Actually, I have worked on the version 2.5 earlier, so it was confusing. But in the latest version, since it is like if the table doesn't exist and if the option is update, then it will not be created. It will throw an exception fixed to that point. Stripe of the existing point that I have told, and since in the latest version it is like that, fixed to that point that if the table doesn't exist and if the option is update, then it will give an exception. Understood? Yeah. Just to repeat once again, the first thing is the configuration file, where we name the configuration file as hibernate.cfg.xml, which should be there in the SRC. Okay, and we have configured all the configuration information like the username, the password, the URL, connection pool size, and the dialect. The dialect specifies the database that we are using. Okay, and the some Hibernate specific flags. Okay, and then we'll configure the mapping resources, which are the SBM files, which will map the POJO object to the specific table. Okay, and once the Hibernate configuration is ready, we'll develop a POJO class with all the specific attributes required, and then we'll map the POJO class to the database table or view, whatever it might be. Okay, by using the class tag. Okay, and the root tag for Hibernate mapping is SBM file is Hibernate mapping. Okay, then the SBM file name can be anything, but okay, as a standard we give the POJO class name as the SBM file name. Okay, if the POJO class name is person.java, then the SBM file name will be person.hbm.xml for standard, as a standard representation. Okay, and the root tag is Hibernate mapping, and in that tag we can have a class tag where in the class tag we configure the POJO class name to the table. Okay, name equal to and table equal to something. Okay, and we have if you want to interact a table from a Hibernate application, a table should have a primary key, and that primary key column should be configured first. There might be 100 properties or 100 columns in the table, but at first the primary key column should be configured, then only the remaining attributes should be configured. So the first should be ID tag. In the ID tag we'll configure what is the property name, what is the primary key property name, and what is the primary key column name, and what is the data type. If the data type is string, then we need not to give any type. And if the data type is other than string, then we should give the type. Okay, And then generated class in the ID specifies how the primary key should be generated. If the primary key generated class is assigned, then the primary key is expected by the application. Is expected from the application. So Hibernate will not take care of primary key generation. If the primary key generated class is other than assigned, then Hibernate will take care of primary key generation, and we should not generate that through the application. So that will show, we'll see what are the different types of primary keys that we have. Okay, and the remaining properties other than primary key, the remaining properties will be configured using the property tag. Name equal to something and column equal to something. Okay, and then once the HBM is ready, we configure that HBM in the mapping tag of the configuration file, and then we write a client application where, okay, we create a configuration object which will load the configuration information from the hibernate.cfg.xml, okay, and then we'll create a session factory object which will fetch the configuration information from configuration object and will create session as per the configuration. Okay, and once the session factory is ready, we will get the session object using the open session method, and we execute the begin transactions so that we are telling to Hibernate that from this point this session is ready for database interactions. Okay, and then save is used for insertion. Okay, and then we'll commit the transaction, we'll flush to ensure that the database transaction is correctly committed, and then we'll close the session once the purpose of the session is over. Okay, understood? Now already 100 Ravi is there. Okay, if we try to insert it once again, if we try to save it once again, what it will tell? It will say exception that unique constraint is violated. It's a primary key. Primary key contains even a unique key. Okay, for each and every primary key, a unique key constraint is generated, so that it tells like, okay, the constraint is violated just because already a row exists with the ID 100, but with the same name, if you give different ID, then it will be inserted. Just because the ID is not is the primary key, but name is not the primary key. So ID is different, but name can be the same. Just because name is not the primary key. Okay, that's how it will be. Understood? So there are several things that we can do with Hibernate. This is a very basic thing that we can do with Hibernate. But if we have the knowledge of the basic things, as we progress, we can learn several things. But practice this application at least 5 or 6 times, so that you can be comfortable. What are the elements present and how we can use them and why they are used. Okay, those things you can learn only if you practice them. So Java is a linked language. So if you don't have the knowledge of the current class, or if you don't practice the current class, it will be hard to understand the next class. Or if you don't attend the current class, it will be hard to understand the next class. So try to attend regularly and try to practice regularly. Okay, just let's leave for the day, and tomorrow